term modern medicine is often used to imply superior knowledge and technology to what we had before. Using robots to perform surgeries, for example, seems more evolved than previous methods that weren't nearly as precise. However, Dr. Jeremy Green says we may be too quick to disregard the past practices and achievements of our ancestors. In fact, it's this history that's influenced our current understanding of sickness and health.
We have a problem when we say that medicine became scientific on a given date or a moment in time, or that medicine became modern at some specific juncture, right? So if you look at 18th century medical practitioners in the United States, they understood what they were doing to be modern and in accordance with leading scientific thoughts of the time.
Green is a physician, professor, and director of the Institute of the History of Medicine at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine.
I think that within medicine, many people inhabit a history that, of course, we were just wandering in the wilderness for a while and then suddenly medicine became scientific. Or maybe we can draw a straight line about step 1, step 2, step 3. But I think that the challenge is as long as there has been medicine and as long as there has been science, there has been such a thing as scientific medicine.
Still, there are a few moments in history that many American historians point to as the scientific revolution. Some controversial claims believe it was the creation of the American Medical Association in 1847. Others hold the germ theory of disease to be the turning point. However, Green argues that there can never really be a specific time in history because the practitioners in every period considered their work to be modern and cutting edge.
The world is different before and after the widespread acceptance of germ theory, for example, which is what a lot of people point to. Or the world is different before and after the widespread adoption of randomized controlled trials for the proof of whether or not a pharmaceutical therapy is effective or not. Each of these periods has its own different thing that could be pointed to about why modern medicine was so much better than that which came before. So we could talk about a number of different inflection points, but no one of them is actually truer than the others.
Despite the controversy, Green agrees that he'd rather be working and receiving care with today's knowledge. Before there were X-rays and antibiotics, America's public health relied mainly on folk and traditional medicine. Traditional medicine centered around the theory of the 4 humors, which states that a person's health depends on the balance of 4 bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Dr. Kenneth M. Ludmerer is a Mapledorn Reader Distinguished Professor of the History of Medicine at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. He says that this practice was often referred to as heroic medicine because of the intense nature of the treatments.
Physicians would bleed, they would purge, they would apply leeches on as treatments. There was little empirical basis to the work that they did. And if you're looking at 17th, 18th, much of the 19th century, there was significant competition from non-medical healers. This included, particularly in the 19th century, various medical sects such as homeopathy, Thompsonian, water healing, and it also included a lot of faith healing and just a lot of common sense folk medicine.
Bloodletting is a practice that dates all the way back to ancient Egypt. If a person was sick, the physician would draw blood until the illness was gone. It's thought that this method led to the death of America's founding father, George Washington, who had 40% of his blood taken to try and cure his sudden sickness. You may be wondering why physicians continued to use these methods when the outcomes were so varied and the negative side effects could result in the patient's death. Well, Ludmerer says that this was during a time before data was gathered through observation and experiments. Word of mouth was the best advertising, and those who it didn't work on often weren't alive to share their experience.
Everyone had a certain number of successes, if for no other reason than most people got well anyway, despite what was done to them, not necessarily because of what treatment they received.
However, this began to change when the numerical method was brought into medicine at the beginning of the 19th century in France. It was the beginning of the controlled clinical trials we have today, which compare the results of a medication or procedure to a group of people that didn't receive the same treatments. It was this method that revealed that many popular therapies didn't work.
But then as time went on and scientific medicine began to yield significant fruit, you could use the same statistical and numerical methods to show that diphtheria antitoxin work. that fluid therapy worked in certain conditions, that thyroid treatment worked for those who were hypothyroid. And so by the end of the 19th century, it was quite clear that scientific medicine was working.
And though Green argues that medicine and science have always been intertwined, this specific moment in time became the foundation for the modern medical schools we have today. Since we had a new way of testing the efficacy of treatments, we needed a new way to educate physicians that would be rooted in scientific research. It was a huge financial undertaking that was mainly backed by billionaire John Rockefeller, along with a few other philanthropists. In 1893, Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine became America's first modern medical school, heavily relying on lab research and the scientific method. Unfortunately, the quality of education was extremely underwhelming.
If you went to medical school, that degree didn't guarantee any particular robustness in clinical education, let alone laboratory education. Medical students didn't even necessarily need to take a different course in their second year or their third year or their fourth year. They could repeat the same courses. So there was a real problem in the nature of medical education, which Johns Hopkins, on its founding at the very end of the 19th century, set up a curriculum of the first 2 years being laboratory basic science education, the second 2 years being clinically based hospital rotations in an academic teaching hospital.
This new approach to education became the standard in America, but there were still many schools that continued using the old methods. In order to create cohesion between more than 100 medical schools across the nation, the Carnegie Foundation commissioned Abraham Flexner to conduct an independent report of all of America's medical schools that was published in the year 1910. While this report is a pivotal moment in American history for standardizing medical education, it was incredibly damaging for women and people of color in this field. Join us next week as we deep dive into the Flexner Report and the unwilling sacrifices made in the pursuit of medical advancement. You can find out more about Dr. Jeremy Green, Dr. Kenneth Ludmerer, and all of our guests on our website, radiohealthjournal.org. For more behind the scenes, follow Radio Health Journal on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Our writer-producer is Kristen Farah. Our production manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Greg Johnson.